I have a 2013 Ram Limited 1500 truck that I love, but it doesn't support Apple CarPlay. And so I purchased a unit from Nifty City, an adapter to add that capability. I also, when I ordered the upgrade, RAM upgrade from 2 gigabyte to 3 gigabyte, as well as the wireless CarPlay support. So I'm going to run through the installation. And I do want to mention that I have a separate video, which is a review of the unit. So once I've installed it and I've had it for a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a separate review for that. So let's get started. All right, this is the box it came in, and I went ahead and took the main unit out there, you can see, and spread out all the components that came in the box. You can kind of see there's a set of cables, a little PC board that's going to get installed in the back of the radio, and some other connectors and whatnot. So I'll just kind of run through these as I install them, and then there's a wiring diagram that came with it, which I will share as well. Okay, this is the wiring diagram, and it's pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, I think the one item of note here is that there is this wired connection to the little daughter board, and you have to make sure that the daughter board is inside the unit, and that cable needs to come outside the unit, the head unit. So that's something that I'll cover during the install as well. But other than that, the connections are pretty straightforward, but there are quite a few of them, so you just have to be sure to double check them, make sure you've made all of them. All right, so we're going to need to get the radio unit out. One of the things I want to talk about is just the configuration here. So I've got the shift knob and the sort of console center here, which is sort of a characteristic of this truck. You may have the same. If you have something different, then it may need a different setup. In order to take out the radio, to remove this trim piece, in order to remove this trim piece here, we have to remove this one as well. So the screws that I found there's two up here in this section. There's one behind here. Okay, so you have to remove this little trim piece here. Just pull that out, and then behind there's a screw. And I also saw that when we pull this out, there were a couple of screws here as well. I went out, those are removed, you can see. And so once that's done, we can just pull on some of the trim pieces. So I'll share that. Okay, so the next thing was I went ahead and pulled this trim piece off. Just pull it straight out, sort of straight up. Okay, and then next is this piece here. See this one, I think the person who had the truck before me had some holes drilled here. They had something mounted. But you just lift this from the back first. Okay, and then it just kind of pulls out like that. Okay, and now, again, make sure you have all those screws removed. One thing I want to do though is before I go and actually deal with the radio, I'm going to go disconnect the battery. Okay. Just to make sure there's nothing actually happening here. So let's go do that. Okay, so here's the battery here. I'm gonna just pull this little cover back, and you can see the positive and negative. I'm just gonna disconnect this here. It's a little 10 millimeter. Disconnect it here, and just what I do is I just put a piece of cloth in between this and the terminal, just to make sure that it doesn't like fall back, lean on it, and reconnect or something. So anyways, just disconnect that, and you'll be good to go. All right, and there you can see what I've done. Just disconnected and put something kind of between there so it doesn't flop back on to the connector. All right, let's go back inside and continue. Okay, with all the screws removed and the ground disconnected from the battery, we can go and remove this big trim piece here. So basically you just kind of pull on it, and there's some clips you'll hear disconnecting as we kind of give it a tug there. And then you want to be careful because there's still some cables connected back here, right? So you don't want to just yank the whole thing out, but basically give it a tug, you'll see it disconnects, and then what I do is kind of lift it and kind of set it aside a little bit. Be careful not to tug on those connectors, okay? Okay, so you can see what I've done here is I've just leaned the trim piece forward with all the connectors still intact. I didn't want to disconnect anything quite yet. And so you can see the screen here. And so now to remove the actual unit, what we're going to do is there's 4 screws here. So 1, 2, and then on the other side, same thing, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to disconnect those, and same thing, kind of pull the unit forward a little bit before we disconnect it, just to kind of ease it out. Okay, so you can see I've tilted the trim piece forward, and the unit's exposed here. And so the next step is to take it out. So there's 4 screws here, 1, 2, and the other side 3, 4. And again, there's a bunch of cables connected in the back, so you don't want to just yank it out. You want to just kind of unscrew those, kind of lean it forward, and kind of see what's back there. Okay, here's a still of the connectors in the back there. So just to give you an idea of what connections you're going to need to remove. Okay, most of these little clips just connect in a pretty straightforward manner here. You just press the little tab and then you can pull them out. There's a big one here where it's not so obvious. What you have to do is, there's this big tab sticking out, so you have to push that in, and then you can lift up this whole arm. Okay, so push the little tab that's sticking out and lift it up. I can't do that while I hold the camera, so I will do that now. Okay, you can see we got the unit out here. So now we got to open it up so we can install the PC board. First thing I see here, there's 4 screws here, 1, 2, and the other side 3, 4. So we're going to take those out. Little Torx T10 screwdriver. Okay, one note here is that once you remove the 4 screws, that this top piece is connected to the bottom piece via a little connector. So be careful when you lift it up, and you can flip it over, and you can see there's a little connecting cable there. So I'm just going to gently set that over, turn it over like that. Okay, now that you've got the top flipped open like that, the next step is to lift this PC board out and move it out of the way. And what I did was I just took a tiny little X-Acto knife and kind of went under here and lifted it up a little bit. There's no screws holding it down, but there is a connector, and I'll show you as I lift this up a little bit. Kind of reseat it in here. Hold on. So lift it up a little bit, and when I flip it over, you'll see that the only thing that was holding in place was that black connector. See that? That was kind of sitting in there like that. So once you've got that, you can flip this out of the way and just kind of set it aside here gently. Okay, now that the top has been flipped over like that, the next thing is to remove this metal piece here. So there's a few screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And let's go ahead and do that. Okay, in addition to the 5 screws that I removed that were Torx T8, there's also a few on the side here. So that one, and then this one, and that one. So let's go ahead and remove those as well. Okay, now that those side bolts are out, I'm just going to try to lift this up. What's happening is there's a few little clips here. You'll see one there, and 2 on the other side as well, that you kind of need to pull back a little bit so they'll loosen, they won't catch on this top piece. So go ahead and do that, and lift it up as you're doing that, and that top should come off. Okay, now that the top is off, you can kind of see the circuit board here. So this is the little circuit board. There's 2 things we installed. This little circuit board, which is going to fit here, but underneath this piece. So I'm going to lift that up, put this underneath, and then I'll talk about some of the cabling routing. But basically, this plugs into the existing board, and then the existing board cable plugs in under here, okay? And then I believe that similarly for this, this is going to plug into the main board, and then the main board is going to plug in here. There's also this cable that they've given us, which has a connector, which has to plug in here. And I'm not sure exactly where the routing for this cable is going to go. So once I kind of get it in there, we'll see where that ends up. Okay, let's take a minute to talk about some of these connectors here. So in order to make this one accessible, this little black piece just pulls out to the side. So you can see here the white and black pieces are touching. To open this one, you can use a little tiny screwdriver and just kind of pull that little black piece out just a little bit like that, and that'll open it, and you'll slide the cable in, and you'll pinch them back together to close it. Okay. For this longer cable, I'll show you over here. Basically what you do is this black piece just kind of folds up like that, because you can fold it up, then you can pull the cable out and in. Okay, and then for this last one, this little metal clip, see the metal piece, I lifted that up, and now it looks like I can pull back this brown piece a little bit and kind of make room for the cable. So now it looks like that's loose, and I can pull this cable out. I'm realizing that once this cable is attached here, we need a way for this cable to come out from the actual unit here. And so I put this cap back on here, and I think what I'm going to do is try to cut a little slot here in this top piece so that the cable can sort of extend out from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pencil, draw a little line where the plastic meets this metal, and then use that as a little bit of a template to kind of drill a slot wide enough for this cable to come out. The other end of the cable looks like this, and so I'm going to just try to see if I can make it just wide enough to feed this piece through. Okay, so you can see where this is going to go. And you can see that I just drew in pencil there a little outline. So I'm going to try to drill a little slot there for the cable to come through. Okay, you can see where I drilled a little hole there for the cable to come through. I just drilled a few holes and kind of connected them. A little bit of advice, put a little piece of tape over the screw hole, just so you don't get any gunk in there. So that's that. I double checked the size, I think it'll be good. And yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, here you can see I routed the cable through the little slot that I made. And then you can see it's plugged into the little board. So now I'm going to lift up the main board, put there's a little plastic piece and then this little daughter board under there, and then connect this cable to the OEM unit, and then the OEM cable back to the connector under there. And then same thing with this, plug this one into the OEM unit and plug the OEM unit into this connector there. Okay, and then in order to do that, I need to, of course, I disconnected this cable, and then this board is held in place with two little metal tabs. There's one there and one there. So you just kind of push them back a little bit, then you can lift up this board and kind of tilt it up. Okay, here's a picture of it, the board in place. You can see you can line up these little holes here, the plastic underneath there, and then I've attached the OEM cable to this board, both under there and this one here as well, and close the little connector, so that's closed, and then the one under here is closed as well. Okay, so the board's back in there, and again there's a few clips that hold the motherboard, the little board in place, the OEM board. So that one, that one, that one, and that one. And you see I reconnected the cables, this one and this one as well. And you can see the original and the new one, and then the original one's under here, and then this new one. Yeah, so that's it. And then you see again my cable is routed out through the little slot. Okay, so now we're just going to reassemble. So we're going to put in the 5 screws here, and then also the 4 that were on the side. So the 2 on this side and then 2 on that side. Let's go and do that. Okay, it's reassembled with the screws in here. I do want to make a note about this little slot I cut, which is that I noticed in another video online that they had just kind of routed the cable up, I think, through the top, kind of between, you know, the 2 pieces of aluminum, which in my mind would be pinching a little bit, so that's why I made the slot. So anyway, your mileage may vary. Okay, next up is putting things back together. So this board is going to come back in there, make sure that it attaches that connector. I'm just going to set it in here for a second, and then we're going to take this piece and again just kind of flip it over and making sure that it attaches, you know, this connector goes in here. And then we put the screws in the 4 corners, there and there, and the other side. So let's go and do that. All right, you can see that we have the unit reassembled here with the cable coming out the side. There's a wiring diagram with information on how to connect all the various cables. I'll just kind of pan here so you can kind of see them, but there's quite a few. I think it's fairly straightforward, so we'll go ahead and start doing that. Okay, I went ahead and made all the connections, double checked everything. I just put a couple of screws at the top here to attach the unit there. And then I have all the cables going down through, and here's the box, and with the USB cable sticking out here. So what I'm going to do is just double checked all the connections, and I'm going to go reconnect the battery, start up the truck, and give it a check. Let's talk a little bit about the cable routing and where I place the unit here. They mostly lead down to the little box, which might be a little bit hard to see here, but it's kind of tucked away down under here. There's a yellow cloth, and it's on top of that cloth. I'll show you a different shot here. You can kind of see the box there. Okay, so some cables there. And then there are 3 cables that I ran down the side here. There's the first one is the USB cable here. Okay, so I'm gonna have that one so I can attach my phone. There's a second one, which ends up being the microphone, and a third one, which is this, has a little GL there in the switch, and this is used to switch between the sort of standard radio and CarPlay. So that's what this button is for. So those 3 cables are coming down right now on the driver's side, and I'm gonna see what I can do about routing them. I have the wireless CarPlay version, so I ended up not using the USB cable. I do have this GL button, which switches between the CarPlay and factory radio, so I'll probably pin that someplace here, maybe with a sticky or something, stick it on there. And then the microphone I just clipped on down here, and I tried a couple times using a Siri with it clipped down there, and it worked fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the car here, and I'll show you it kind of starting up. So it'll come up and it'll boot up, and then because I was using CarPlay last, it'll switch to CarPlay automatically. My phone's just sitting up there on top just for convenience sake, but it's again, you can see it's not connected, it's wireless. So and it comes up, and it's in the radio where I had it, and of course I'll just hit play here for whoops, play. And so that all works as expected, and all the different apps and whatnot are there. So there you go. Okay, now that CarPlay is in, I do want to show switching between CarPlay and the radio functions. So here's this GL button. So you'll see if I click it once, it'll switch to the built-in controls, and of course you can do whatever you would normally do here. All these buttons work, as expected, whatever. And then to switch back, you press and hold this for about 5 seconds, and it switches back to the CarPlay. If you go in here, you'll see there is a button that says Jeep, which is, of course, is a Ram, but this is the button that if you press on other car installations, it takes you to the factory controls. In this one, it actually takes you to the Nifty City unit controls, and it has some things in here that you can set up. You can modify just for this unit itself, and then you can go back to CarPlay.